Good evening, everybody. Let's try that again. Hello, everyone. This is Bart Kemp with Malcolm Blunt. Video number 4 about the Blunt archives. Today's subject, the ONI. Right. Now we can start at different angles. So why don't we just first of all talk about your discovery of the ONI, the files of the ONI, how things got together, before we get into the specifics.
Okay. I think I've been at the National Archives just at the moment where the NARA were authorizing releases to the National Archives, and one of the releases was were the files relating to Lee Harvey Oswald. That was ONI files, which were 3 boxes, 3 large grey file boxes of material relating to Lee Harvey Oswald. And so I was able to ask for those because I knew that those boxes had arrived at the National Archives. And so I requested those. That would be in August, September 1997.
Been a while.
Been a while, yeah.
What did those files tell you with that selection of files? What was in it?
I think it's more a question of what was not in it.
Okay. What was not in it?
As I was to learn later. But yeah, I mean, there were fairly standard files. There are files that you would expect to find on Lee Harvey Oswald, just the normal stuff. They took a lot of information from the FBI. They took a lot of information from other intelligence agencies, and they just took just quite a lot of
generic files, basically.
Generic files. The stuff that they produced from ONI was not a great deal.
At that point.
Mainly other government agencies, mainly. So that's.
So when does it becoming interesting then?
It became interesting because just a couple of weeks later, I still had the files on my cart. I was still looking through those files at the National Archives, and I was suddenly aware on the right-hand side of me, an archivist called Steve Hamilton, who I got on with quite well, and Steve said to me, "Mr. Blunt, this is Mr. Reeves, who worked for ONI. He wants to look at the ONI files. Can you give him permission to look at the files because they're charged out to you? They're yours." I said, "Yeah, fine, no problem." So I shook hands with Mr. Reeves and his wife, who was with him, and it went from there, really. He sat opposite me. I was at Archives working table, and they're divided. You can get 4 people at a table, a research table, and then there are very good lamps which are able to give you a really good light when you look at archive material. It's almost like a daylight light.
Oh, okay. Color temperature.
Yeah. So he was sat opposite me, and he started to look through the ONI files. He told me he was looking for his reports, and I said, "What reports?" And he said, "My 119 reports." I said, I was puzzled, and he said, "Yes, when Oswald defected, I was asked by higher authority to investigate Oswald's defection, everything about Oswald. I said, oh, interesting. And so that's where we started. He looked at that, started looking at it, and it became clear that the more time went on, the more agitated he became, because he couldn't find his reports. They weren't there. And the first box he put up, the second box he took down, he slammed down. And I said, oh, and he looked over at me and he said, my reports aren't here. I said, well, you've got 2 boxes to go. And so he chunted a bit, and then he got stuck in again to looking through the files for his 119 reports, the reports of his investigation into Oswald's defection.
Mm.
And of course, he couldn't find any evidence of his reports. Although later on we talked about the number of reports. At first he thought he did 10 or 12 reports. Then later on he settled around about 19 to 20 reports, 19 being more accurate. So he did these 19 reports, which were then assembled into an investigative report, which was sent to ONI headquarters, which he sent on. And we actually went to, as I recall, we went to the cafeteria at some stage at NARA. We went downstairs and we checked out, as we normally do through security, and then went into the cafeteria section. And that's when Fred Reeves told me that in 1959, when Oswald defected, he received a phone call from ONI headquarters in Washington, D.C., and it was from the top man, Admiral Rufus Taylor. And Rufus Taylor ordered him to do an investigation of Oswald. Well, Fred, as you can imagine, he's down there in San Diego, California, the 11th Naval District, and suddenly on the line he's got the top man ordering him to do an investigation. Fred said he was shocked. He was very shocked, and it took him just a little while to get his composure. But then he understood that he had to do this investigation, which he did do. He did this investigation of Lee Harvey Oswald for naval intelligence. And he told me that he had reports in from all over the US, but most of the meaningful information that they had came from Japan. They had a lot of information on Oswald in Japan, and that came into it. But as far as detail was concerned, like a good intelligence officer, you couldn't get anything about detail. No detail. Except that a massive amount of information came in, mostly from Japan, the most significant from Japan. And he did his work, he did his reports, did the investigation, did the final analysis, sent it on to HQ, to Admiral Taylor. And that's where it was left with Fred as far as he was concerned. I think from conversations with him, he was surprised that he wasn't called as a witness during the Warren Commission hearings. He was really surprised. But then that just left him. But when the second investigation, the House Select Committee investigation, came up, he did correspond to the HSCA. But again, that didn't get very far.
Why not?
Well, we don't know. I mean, I've never found a great deal of paperwork in HSCA files. It was only really when the ARB came into being in the 90s that he wrote to the ARB telling them about his investigation in 1959 into Lee Harvey Oswald. And they looked into it in some depth, and they tried to make some progress, but made little progress because naval intelligence, of course, always denied there was no investigation. So
which would be really really weird actually for an organization as such,
yeah.
especially when it's that close connected to the United States Marine Corps.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's when you think about it, here's a guy that was a U.S. Marine. He's defected in the Soviet Union. I mean, he at some point says that he's going to give up information of a special nature, and there's no investigation. There's no investigation of Lee Harvey Oswald in 1959 by ONI. Hardly believable.
Yeah.
But that's what we're expected to believe. And Fred Reeves is a very, very important witness to history because he gives a light to that. I mean, I think Fred thought because the ARB was looking into this, his reports would surface. That's why he contacted the review board. But he was, of course, as I witnessed, opposite. When he looked through the O&O files, there were no documents relating to his investigation. In fact, they've been deep sixed. And the only person with the authority to deep six an investigation of that magnitude would be Admiral Rufus Taylor. I mean, you get really odd juxtapositions because later on, 8 years time, Rufus Taylor, Admiral Taylor, became Deputy Director of CIA, and he was the guy that became involved with a new investigation, a new approach to dealing with Yuri Nosenko, the defector. And the person he appoints is Bruce Soley, and Bruce Soley was the security research staff guy that was on the bridge, if you like, at the very start of the investigation into Oswald, inside CIA, when CIA was looking at this, and the FBI came along. They asked Jane Roman, who was liaison with CIA. They asked Mrs. Roman, who is this guy Oswald? And she said, oh, go talk to the security office, the Office of Security, which is a pretty strange recommendation. Here's a defector to the Soviet Union. You're asked to go to the security office? This is unheard of. Anyway, so this guy, so it's Papich, Sam Papich of the FBI. Instead of Jane Roman being able to give anything as liaison, CIA, he has to go to Bruce Soley at the security office. And Bruce Soley tells him, we have nothing on Oswald. So there you go. I mean, but if you look at that sort of like circle, it's really strange. You've got Rufus Taylor doing an investigation of Oswald in 1959, ordering an investigation of Oswald in 1959, and then Rufus Taylor, 8 years' time, involved with the person, Soley, who's the guy that's the go-to guy on Oswald. That's a strange coincidence to me. And but then the case is full of coincidences. So there you go. But then Fred Reeves, I mean, he was clearly not happy when I sat opposite him at the National Archives. He got angrier and angrier. And I think by the time he got to the third box, he slammed it down. It was a big slamming sound. And it just said to me, my files are not here. My files, my investigation, it's not here, he said. And he stood up, and he stood up in front of me and waved his arms. He was really annoyed. So I said to him, innocently, well, perhaps they misfiled them. And then, boy, a bomb went off. He leaned over about that much away from me, and he said, we're ONI, we never misfile things. so he was not a happy camper. But we exchanged telephone numbers and addresses, and we kept in touch after that for several months. I mean, the telephone conversations both ways, because he would call me sometimes, I would call him. He lived in Rancho Santa Fe, California, and he would call me, and I would call him, and always there was a sound of clicking and clacking and clocking, and it was obviously he was trying to set up a tape recorder to record the conversations. But you expect these things. I mean, that's normal.
Did Reeves ever get to see his files?
No. The Reeves files are gone forever. I don't know they exist, but they do not exist for researchers to look at. In other words, they've been deep sixed for research purposes. They exist probably in a highly classified unit somewhere. Yeah, I can see those files still surviving, but for researchers, they're deep sixed. We don't see them. But the investigation of Oswald took place in 1959, despite the fact that it's denied by naval intelligence. And the ARB found exactly the same. They had this denial on the one hand, and they had Reeves on the other hand. So they had ONI saying, no, there was no evidence, and Reeves saying, yeah, I did it. So you have this complete opposite in a way, but I think it's I don't think it's possible that there was no investigation. There would have to be an investigation, and having met Fred Reeves, talk to him, see the guy looking for his reports, discover they weren't there, and go ballistic. There was an investigation in 1959 of Lee Harvey Oswald by naval intelligence, and so there you go. That happened without question. I mean, interestingly, as time went on, I mean, we talked about many different things. One of the things he wanted from me was, of all things, I thought it was a strange request. He wanted a photograph of Oswald in the CAP. You know, there's a photograph that exists of Oswald with David Ferry.
Oh yeah, where they're all like leaning over and they're
like
in the white t-shirts.
like a barbecue.
Yeah.
He wanted a good copy.
Yeah.
And I managed to get him a good copy of that, and he was delighted with that. And we were at a stage when he was telling me about his friendship with a guy called Ed Waltz. And I said to him, I remember saying to him, "Who's Ed Waltz?" And he said, "Ed Waltz was George de Marshall's best friend." I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "What did Waltz tell you? Or what have you got from Waltz?" He said, "Well, I've got a lot of interesting stuff on Ed Waltz." He said he ran. He at the same time, de Marshall was involved in the oil business.
Mm.
Waltz was he owned and ran an oil company called Wardham Oil in Dallas. I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And we were on a cusp of actually discussing Waltz and de Marshall when something changed, and changed radically. I think at that point, because of the ARB interest in Fred's investigation, Fred had received, obviously, communications from ONI to calm down. This is national security, Fred. Don't make any waves. And then suddenly everything was different, and that's when it went sour with Fred, because thereafter, when I found him, I couldn't get him, and then the correspondence ceased, and it was very sad, really, because I thought we were into something, but obviously the guy's a naval intelligence loyalist. He's not. If they say to him, "Look, Fred, don't make waves," then he's not going to make waves.
Mm.
So we lost him, or I lost him.
How many times? I found 1 or 2 envelopes with his name on it amongst your documents. Did you correspond often, or is it
yeah,
just?
fairly often. Yeah, I mean, I think for a year and a half we did. Yeah, maybe once every month to 6 weeks. Yeah, we I'd find something, and I'd write a list of questions and answers. And sometimes he'd write back. Sometimes I wouldn't hear specifics to the questions.
Mm.
It would be more about how is the weather up there, so that sort of that sort of thing, But you expect that, Intelligence officers don't.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's never straightforward, is it? I mean, come on. Yeah.
I mean,
Wouldn't that be
what
nice?
we got was huge, really, because it's proof positive to me anyway. I don't care what anybody else says. It's proof positive to me that there was a naval investigation in 1959. We know who did it. We know who authorized it. We know the person who authorized it. Later on, became a promoter of Bruce Oley to be the interviewer of Nosenko. And these are all interconnected activities.
Mm.
So, very interesting to me. And Fred, to be fair to him, I mean, he did stick to it for a while, until obviously because of the ARB interest and the further interest of ARB, he got pressurized into not cooperating, I think.
But when I hear you tell this story, and when I just think about, see, the ARB was supposed to look at the documentation that's available and basically see whether it should be released or not.
But they couldn't find it.
No, so
it wasn't there because it had been deep sixed.
I know, but then again, just like the medical stuff, for instance, and the military intelligence stuff, they start digging into it, and they end up talking to Reeves, don't they?
Well, they finished up. Their determination was that although they believed Fred Reeves, they could find no documentary evidence.
one word against the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that ended up becoming quite a bit of a dead trail. But
Well, it's not a dead trail because it's important when you look at in the context of so many things that came afterwards. When we're looking at the assassination of President Kennedy and the labeling of Lee Harvey Oswald as the assassin, you can see if that was a straightforward Oswald did it, you wouldn't be deep sixing an investigation of him. You'd be pushing that investigation right out there for everybody to see.
But what I meant by the dead trail is that the ARB basically went into a cul-de-sac, ended up going into a cul-de-sac where it was Fred Reeves' word against non-existent or non-available documents as such. So that at that point, it basically, the trail is dead because
it died.
Yeah, you can't go anywhere. Yeah. Okay, so Oswald and the ONI. Now, there's a handful of documents about this. What I found most interesting myself was the document of the day itself, November 22nd, where they basically start looking for Oswald's file and basically looking it up and trying to bring it up and so forth. Overall, I mean, I think there's about 50 to 60 PDFs on the ONI, and of course there's a chapter called Oswald. There are some generic ones. There's a Fred Reeves folder, obviously, as well, with the especially the ARB correspondence in there. This is also another example of going further than just looking for the documents by the ARB. I mean, I would suggest that this falls into the realm of the same as the military intelligence and also the what's the other one? The medical materials as such. That actually Doc Horn and whoever was the military people within the ARB were actually going much further than actually the remit actually allowed them to go for. I hope to ask this one day, what was the idea behind the whole thing and all that, and try and find out the right answer. But then there was also a individual by the name of Florence Pike.
Yeah, before we go into Florence Pike, could I give
on.
just a little side story with Fred? One of the things that Fred told me was his next door neighbour was Noel Twyman. Now, I ask you, go to Noel Twyman's book, Bloody Treason, and see if you can find one reference to Fred Reeves.
None?
No.
None.
And I did have the opportunity to speak to Noel at a conference, I think it was in 1998 in Dallas. And but I mean, I came up to him cold, and I said, "Do you know who your next door neighbour is?" Fred Reeves. And he looked at me in a quizzical manner, and he said, "Oh, of course." And then and then he moved on to the next person because he was doing the book signing. And I never understood.
I don't think anyone else.
The only way I could look at that is that Fred never ever told Noel about his investigation. Despite being next door neighbours and talking a lot about the Kennedy case, obviously.
What's that book called again? A Cruel and Shocking Act?
Bloody Treason.
Oh, Bloody Treason, yeah, of course. That's Philip Nelson, sorry.
So, yeah, that was interesting to me, that, you know, we have a JFK author, of all people, and next door is a guy that's done the investigation of Oswald when he defects to the Soviet Union for naval intelligence.
Yeah, that is a strange coincidence.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, that is a very strange coincidence.
You were saying anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Florence Pike. How and when does she get into the picture? I will try and insert a picture here at this point of the video. So I think I've got a picture of her. How does this start?
Well, I think it starts obviously with the ARB wanted to look in, wanted to dig into anything, any of their records, the naval intelligence records, which would impact on Lee Harvey Oswald or the JFK assassination and or the JFK assassination, and so that's what they approach. I think the main ARB investigator on ONI was Doug Horn.
Yeah.
So Doug would have gone to ONI to look for whatever he could find, instruct them to take measures to investigate this. And so ONI appointed two people. I can remember Lieutenant Commander Florence T. Pike, and she had an assistant whose name I can't remember. But so there were two people digging into ONI files, and their remit was to try and find anything to do with Oswald or the JFK assassination investigation. And they did a lot of digging in various parts of the U.S. I seem to remember Chicago would be as one place where there were lots and lots of ONI files. So they went there. They went to look there, and Lieutenant Commander Pike came up with. She actually found some things which were relevant, or she thought was relevant. But then there was a senior person involved in ONI called Commander Bastian, I think. And this guy seemed to be quite negative about the material that was coming forward, that was being provided by Lieutenant Commander Pike. I think he seems to feel that she'd gone beyond her remit to look for this stuff. And it progressed badly for Lieutenant Commander Pike.
Like career suicide?
Career suicide, yeah. At some point, she seemed to. There seemed to be some sort of consensus that she'd become mentally unstable. So.
That old chestnut.
Yeah, the old chestnut was calmed down. But I mean, it's tough for me to remember all this. But it just seemed to me that higher officials in the ONI were so concerned that they were trying to suppress Lieutenant Commander Pike's investigation and her attempts to find material, to find documents. And I think at the end of the day that the determination, and Doug Horn will obviously know about this because he dealt with it, was that she was provided material which wasn't really relevant to Oswald or the investigation.
Right.
And one could argue about this, but that's what the review board found.
Very similar.
When I read the documentation at the time, my impression was something different. I think she did find things, and then because she found things, she suffered the consequences.
This whole this relevancy thing is a big part of CIA documents. Actually, that's where it's. It's like
and the FBI as
oh
well.
yeah, NBR.
FBI or NAR, not assassination related. CIA use the ARB term, which is
NBR.
no belief relevance. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you get that, but you know, I mean, as people discovered when Earl Cable stuff was discovered,
Mm.
you know, that was NBR. What the hell was that about? That was never. That was never NBR.
No.
I think there's so much of the stuff, you know, if we might get a bit more stuff this year, who knows? But what we're going to find is the stuff they labelled NBR is not NBR, and the stuff the FBI labelled as NAR is not AR. So we've got to find that. But these are all the tricks they play on us. You know, this is the big dam around the Kennedy assassination. You know, the US government and US intelligence agencies cannot afford for that dam to be breached, and they'll do anything to protect it.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, if something breaks the dam, then the whole thing just
Everything
goes to shit.
everything after goes, everything. So yeah, they won't let it fall. I mean, they'll be working very hard not to let it fall.
No. So, from an ONI point of view, we know that, of course, Oswald, the connection, with Fred Reeves, and now you got this Florence Pike, and you just get the feeling that overall, the ONI likes to hide things and not make sure that certain things are coming out.
Well,
you
can see it. You know, if you believe Fred Reeves, which I do, he gets a phone call from the chief of ONI, Admiral Rufus Taylor, to investigate Oswald, and then, I mean, you can go along with the fact that he didn't jump up and down because it was secret, so it could be expected. But certainly, when you go right along the line to the review board, where everything is supposed to be out, then he surfaces. You know, Fred Reeves surfaces and says, "I did this investigation because the ARB was supposed to be making sure these documents came out, including his investigation." That's the information he took to the review board. I mean, they had long discussions with Fred Reeves. Doug Horn talked with Fred Reeves. He actually came and gave a deposition, which was recorded, tape recorded. So he was took seriously. The ARB, I think, were caught between the official version and the real version. The official version being there was no investigation, and the real version is, with Reeves, yes, there was. So they came out with that verdict, which was as credible as Reeves is. We could find no documentation that supported what he said.
Yeah, when I hear you talk, then, like I discussed earlier during our lunch, it's just that it's just got overlapping elements of military intelligence. For instance, same thing. You know, they're disregarded by, or they're not brought up to the Warren Commission as such. Well, although they did report to the FBI.
You have to, yeah, exactly. You have to look at people like Robert Erdrich, who was a military intelligence officer in New Orleans. Crucial witness, not called by the Warren Commission, not called by the HSCA, still alive when the review board sits and nobody talks to him. It's beyond me sometimes. It really is beyond me. The guy was living in Panama. You know, they got to it. The review board got to it, but having said that, it's possible that they may have had an interview, because when I looked in the miscellaneous ARB files, there is a file on Robert Erdrich, which is empty. So maybe they did. I don't know. But certainly there again we get the same stuff again. Some of the review board files, the 112 series, right at the end, the miscellaneous series, every other box is empty. What the hell's that about? You know, I asked NARA.
We don't know.
It's like a blank stares. This is what you have to deal with, you know.
Indeed. Well, on that note, we're going to call it a day for today. Great talking to you. Thanks again, as always.
No problem.
And we'll speak soon. Cheers.
Cheers.